Well, let's bring in our panel of political strategists this afternoon, Grahame Morris and Bruce Hawke. Good to see you both. I'll come to the polls in a moment and the border protection fight, but let's just pick up on this milk story, because this debate's been going on, Grahame, for years, right? Dairy farmers being dudded. I imagine sitting around the board table at Woolworths, though, it's not necessarily an easy decision, is it? You know, our competitors are still going to be selling milk cheaper than us. We're going to do this to help the farmers, but is it going to cost us customers? What do you think? Have they done the right thing here?
I always thought it was a stunt to get people through the doors, so that if they go for the dollar of milk, they'd buy everything else that's on the shelf.
Yeah.
And that was obviously the strategy.
That's fair enough. It's a way to get people in your store.
But the poor old dairy farmers were saying, well, hang on a minute, that doesn't see a fair price for our product, and it's devaluing all of our work. And you know, I know from my parents who grew oranges for generations, you know, what it cost them and what they got. Yeah. And when they looked at what the supermarkets were selling for, which was a lot of money, this was the reverse, is that, oh, look, why can't I get a fair price for my milk? It looked odd. I think it worked for the supermarkets, fantastic. Yeah. But it confused everybody else about whether or not the farmers were getting a fair go.
And Bruce, you only have to, you know, talk to a dairy farmer, visit a dairy farm operation to see just how tough they do it. I mean, these guys aren't exactly swimming in it, pardon the pun, are they? They really work hard and don't get much return.
Yeah. Exactly, and it's got harder and harder as the years have gone by. And you know, I just don't think it's right that big companies are able to use their economic muscle in a way that actively, you know, persecutes people who are producing, you know, a vital staple for the Australian public. And I'm glad that Woolworths is no longer doing it, and I hope that in a way that they've learned a lesson from it. And I hope the people who were so annoyed with them that they went elsewhere will go back to them now. But no, I don't think it's a good thing, and I think most Australians would be thinking exactly the same thing, that you don't use your muscle in that way when the people who are suffering as a result of that are very hard-working Australians who are really producing a very important product for the Australian and the international market.
Yeah, well, we go through a hell of a lot of it in our house. Let's turn to the opinion polls and have another look at them. The IPSOS poll in Fairfax Media, or should I say Nine Network Media today, shows quite a drop there for Labor, down 4 points. This is since December. They only do them every 2 or 3 months. Nonetheless, that's a big drop for Labor there and a 2-point gain for the Coalition, and it translates into a two-party result, which has really tightened in. Government back in the race. Grahame, how much would government MPs be taking from those numbers?
The government has found the only other poll that counts, apart from the one on election day. Look, what this has done for morale is fantastic. You know, everyone was saying if the Prime Minister could get the government to 51-49 going into an election, he can win it. Now, you know, we all know that the Ipsos poll can be a bit ratty.
A bit like a yo-yo.
Bit all over the place. But there's no doubt if the Prime Minister can hold this sort of gap through to the election, they can win it.
Well, whereas there's plenty of election
52,
campaigns.
53 against them.
There's plenty of election campaigns where governments have gone in at 51-49 down and won.
And you know, you look at what's the difference? Well, the difference is the border protection. And I'm not quite sure what the government thought they were doing. You know, they did it for about a day and a half. And then, you know, they said, oh, we'll go and do Twitter and social media. And they forgot about, you know, 7, 9, 10, Sky, the ABC are crying out for a voice to talk about it. Meanwhile, they talk about fish and they talked about cows and they talked about everyone else except the main game. And if it wasn't for God bless him, the Attorney General yesterday and the poll today, you know, the issue would have almost gone. And it's a very, very important one. You know, there are 3 issues at the moment. Malcolm Fraser won one on the Labor Party mucking around with the price of homes. Andrew Peacock nearly knocked off Hawke on mucking around with old people's assets. And John Howard did quite well with border protection. This government has got all 3, and now they're in a position where maybe, just maybe, they can win this.
Well, it's an interesting historical comparison, Bruce, on the numbers you see today in the Ipsos poll. Do you believe them, and what do you put them down to?
Oh, look, I think you've got to accept that they're in the ballpark, and I think it's a disturbing development really for Labor. It does come down, I think, to the issue of boat people, and we know for the last almost 20 years this has been an issue which has plagued the Labor side of politics. Whenever it's come into the forefront, it's been a vote loser for Labor. We saw in 2001 John Howard win the unwinnable election when the Tampa came over the horizon and picked up some people and then was refused admission into the Australian waters. And we saw the Prime Minister's response, we decide who comes into this country in the circumstances in which they do. Now, I didn't agree with any of that, but it was very effective politics, and I was working on that campaign, and I saw the impact that it had on the vote for Labor. So I'm concerned about it. I think that Labor...
Which leads to the question, Bruce, do you think Labor was crazy to open up this issue on the eve of an election?
Look, I think Labor always has a more complex story to tell when it comes to issues like this. They've got a strong humanitarian streak that runs through the party, and that's something that's commendable. But I don't think it's a good thing for Labor to be fighting over right now. I would have rather seen that not happen. And I think, however, there are plenty of other issues which Labor can point to and move to between now and the election. What worries me is that we will see a boat come over the horizon. And my God, the amount of publicity that the government's been directing towards Indonesia with special advertisements going up there telling them not to send people here could only have alerted a lot of people to a debate that's going on in Australia. So, look, I think Labor should move on and get on to the issues that are really powerful for it.
Look, Mr Shorten hasn't made too many mistakes, but I think this one is a mistake of Kim Beazley epic proportions. He has opened it up, and he's defending the most stupid thing I have heard in 40 years in politics, and that was, we will only allow this to apply to the people who are there now. And you think, oh, mate, if you haven't got a backbone in opposition, how weak are you going to be with Tanya Plibersek and Albo and whatnot sitting around cabinet meetings if you're in government?
To Bruce's point, though, about, I mean, clearly Labor wants to get the focus off this issue. Will that largely, and you're right, the poll today has kept it alive. Will it remain a big issue if no boat comes?
Well, only if the government communications people do their job.
How do they do that?
What does that mean?
How do they do that?
What does that mean?
Well, it's not hard. You've just got to come up with different angles each day and get really your best spokespeople out there. And it's not just sitting there and having clever little people tweeting. You know, this time last week, I tweeted 88,000 people looked at the blinking thing. There wasn't an undecided voter in it. Yeah, they've got to do 7, 9, 10, the ABC and you, and not just focus on Twitter. And it's got to be a different angle every day, and they've got to have the big boys in there.
But do you think there are enough angles in this, or does it really require something to happen?
No, of course there are. Well, if a boat
I think they will. They'll look for angles. They'll look for angles. They'll look for angles every day. And, you know, they're running ads now. That's another angle. You know, they're making speeches to the people of Indonesia. That's another angle. This is something that look, let's be in no doubt about this. This is the big issue that the Morrison government has going for it. It's not going to win on its record with about party unity. It's not going to win on its reluctance to do anything about the Banking Royal Commission and being dragged kicking and screaming into any other number of arrangements that they didn't want to go into. It's going to win, if it is going to win, on this issue and this issue only, because that's what the Australian public are anxious about. And Labor has to move on from this and move on from it expeditiously.
Well, let's just move on ourselves right now, because we've dealt with that one. This cyber attack we've heard about today, not just the parliament system, but the parties, Labor, Liberal and the Nationals as well. Look, a lot of people, Graham and Bruce, might wonder, what have they got what don't they have? What have they got, the political parties, that a state actor might be interested in?
Well, that's right. And I thought it was interesting. I thought, well, the federal secretariats of the party, they have the electoral roll, they have the feedback sort of thing where they know what people roughly think.
This is
and they have a few
rich data on voters, essentially.
It's just data. But then I thought, well, so what? Or you could get addresses for, you know, some of your, if you're a foreign country, some of your, you know, expats that you don't like. But then I thought, no, that's not it. Have a look at what happened in America, where everything was dumped on WikiLeaks, and it was the fact that it was dumped on WikiLeaks. But what was the only story out of it? Is Hillary Clinton had a private email address. And you think, there was all that fuss about millions of things dumped by WikiLeaks. It was the fact that it was dumped that was embarrassing, and one thing on Hillary Clinton, that was it.
Yeah, there are a few things that came out about what the chair of the Democrat committee had said about Hillary, and all this sort of gossipy stuff, I suppose, that can fuel an election campaign as well, Bruce. But what would you be most worried about if you were in charge of one of these parties right now?
Look, I think I'd be worried about the fact that they can do it. And that was part of what the Russian intervention in the American elections was all about. It was really messing with their heads. You know, that for the first time, we may not actually be in control, completely in control of our own destiny. And I think that's a psychological game that's played. They may also get access to emails, some of which could be embarrassing, and you know, where someone's failed to comply with the age-old dictate that you don't write an email if you don't want to see it appear on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald.
That's a good rule. It's a very good rule. And of course, Joyce raised a concern earlier too. He was saying, you know, what if they've got access to our mobile phones and our text messages, and particularly politicians and journalists, and what's said between them that's off the record or a background and so on. I don't know if they've got that sort of information. We really don't know, but that would be a big worry.
Well, it would. And that's why a lot of these politicians and political actors now use other platforms like Signal or WhatsApp. But even those are probably vulnerable in some shape or form. I mean, I think this is the 21st century. Welcome to the future. This is what it's going to be like. At least in Australia, we have paper voting slips, and that's a very important thing and something they don't have in the United States. People actually have to go into a ballot booth and into a booth and fill out their vote on paper. A very important thing.
And that's worth reminding everyone that they did confirm today the Electoral Commission has not been hacked, and that's a very good thing, Grahame, because we've got to have confidence in the actual running of elections as free and fair. And so that was good to hear today.
I agree. Really important that that part of the system is not cocked up. So at worst, we're going to have stuff that will embarrass people that's leaked. But the Secretariat, and I've talked to them today, they're not quite sure. They're cooperating with all the police and the security people and all that. But I don't think anyone really knows what was taken, if anything was taken.
No, well, it's still an ongoing investigation. We will see. We better go. Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker, good to talk to both of you. We'll catch up next week. Thank you. All right, we're going to take a quick